Hi guys, Nigel Saunders for KW Bonsai. Today we're going to look at two sister trees. They were purchased at the exact same time and they looked fairly identical when I got them. They were just bought from Canadian Tire in their plant section. They weren't supposed to be bonsai trees. They had a really nice root base and I thought, well, they've got a lot of potential. So I've treated both trees differently, and often if you have a lot of the same species of tree, you can experiment around on them. You can try different techniques on one. You can shape them differently. So that's what I've done. This tree I've shaped with a single main trunk. So I had to prune off a lot of the auxiliary branches and everything. It looked more like the other one here, which had all the multi-trunks coming up. So that one I'm growing as a multi-trunk, almost like a banyan style. And this one, it's also going to be a banyan style, but a simpler form to it. So we're just playing around with different looks for the trees. So the first thing we're going to do to both these trees is clean them up. You can see there's a lot of weeds growing, clover and all kinds of things. The moss is, again, because it's in the greenhouse, it's growing really thick. So we want to get rid of the moss on this one anyway, and prune the moss up on the other one. This tree is growing in just a training pot. It's a tray that you'd put underneath a bigger pot. I've drilled holes in the bottom with a cement drill for drainage, and it's a pretty big pot, but I don't know. Okay, so we're gonna start cleaning up these trees, and we'll check in when I've stripped all the moss off and weeded them. Okay, so I've got most of the moss removed. It does take quite a while, so if you are preparing a tree for a show, allow, probably a couple of hours to pick at the moss with the tweezers, get it all off the trunks, and yeah, so be patient, it takes a long time. So this one I've stripped the moss totally off, and this one I've trimmed it down with the scissors to a fine layer. And so, as I said, these two trees, they're Ficus Retusas. They're the same age. They were almost identical when I got them, very similar in shape and size. So because I've cut this one back to a single trunk, it sets the tree back a lot because it loses almost all its foliage, and it takes quite a while to recover. So what I've done is I've left the tree grow freely, and it's getting to the point where it's getting a little long to fit in the greenhouse, so I've got to prune it back. If it wasn't in the greenhouse, I'd probably let it grow even longer, but have to be practical about how big you want your tree to grow before you start trimming it back. So we're going to trim it back today. The other tree, because it's a multi-trunk, I kept most of the foliage on it, the initial foliage, and I've let it grow. I think it grew all last summer, and then in fall I selectively prune the branches back to bring it down. And I've been doing the same thing this summer. I let the branches go quite long and then cut them back to a good point. So it's at the point, it's not overly big right now, but I'm going to go in and do some selective branch pruning and trim it up again. Okay, so you can see the moss is a lot shorter now and looks quite nice again. We are getting a lot of aerial roots coming down from the trunk. You can see the white ones here. There's quite a few out back that have actually reached the soil level and have been growing again. The other tree, it too, a lot of these roots go along the surface of the soil and they actually go over the lip of the pot. So ideally you would want to, you know, dig a hole in your soil and get the root going into the soil there. So this tree, I've picked a front. This is probably the, no, is that the front? Hold on. Let me see here. I think that's the front. Yeah, that's the front of the tree. And the reason I chose that as the front of the tree is purely on just the branch or the root arrangement around the trunk. It's got some pretty big roots in there, and then the aerial roots have grown over top and they'll fuse in eventually with the trunk. And it's also, I'm not sure about the branch arrangement on it. I'm not going to get too fussy about the branches at this point. It is going to be sort of a clump style canopy. So, you know, I don't have one single leader growing up the center of the trunk. Some of the other views you might get that, but maybe not. However, this is the front for now. I mean, this tree is going to be styled fairly symmetrically. So, I mean, I could rotate it around and change the front pretty well at any time. This tree over here, I haven't picked a front yet for it. We can kind of go around and look at, whoa, can't see there. Look what's going on. It's in a round pot at the moment, so it doesn't really matter where the front is. We just want to prune the branches up and clean up the structure of the tree. So both these trees are 4 years old from the time I purchased them. So they've come a long way in the 4 years. When you're building trunks like this, because I had to, on this one I stripped it down to the single trunk, you know, as I said, it does set it back a lot, and sometimes, you know, the first year after I pruned it all up, I didn't get a whole lot of growth. You know, it takes time to develop leaves which give the tree energy, which helps it, which makes it grow. So, yeah, it takes a while. Once you get kind of the structure you want and you start to actually just develop the canopy, that part of the bonsai process is fairly quick. It's just a matter of pruning and pinching, and you know, you can develop this canopy in, you know, 3 or 4 years. You can get a pretty nice canopy. So yeah, building the trunks is the hardest part in bonsai, and that's where the character of the tree comes out. So on our first tree here, I'm going to start pruning it, and what I'm going to do is, there's some places where there's 3 branches coming out from one point, so I'm going to prune that back to 2. I'm going to prune anything growing inward towards the center of the tree. I'm going to prune that off. Overly long shoots like this, I'm going to prune them back shorter. And we'll probably thin out a lot of the top of the tree too. It's getting a little dense in here, so we'll do some thinning, so especially branches that are growing inwards. So we want, you know, an even light to hit every part of the tree. We don't want these lower branches in shadow. So, you know, basically when you develop your canopy and you prune it to a umbrella type shape, that gives the entire branch structure even light. So that's why trees grow like that in nature, and That's why they grow well as a bonsai with that umbrella type shape. Okay, so I'm going in, I'm being fairly conservative at first. As you prune the structure down, you start to see, less foliage and more branches, so you can see the shape of the tree better. But generally, I'm pruning to a downward facing leaf, which will create a new bud that'll grow more horizontally. That'll stop your shoots from shooting upright. Now, that's for the lower branches. The upper branches, you do want them to come more vertical. So that's what I'm doing. I'm just giving it a general trimming for now. And once the general trimming's done, then we'll start looking more at the tree, the branch structure and everything. And when I say branch structure, I also mean trunk structure, because the difference between a branch and a trunk is this vertical growth, that's considered a trunk. These are trunks, and the trunks continue to grow and taper in height and go more vertically. Then the branches come off of these trunks. So you always want to keep your trunk line the thick part, and the branches are the fine branching that comes off of the trunks. Now with ficuses, there are some exceptions. You get branches or trunks that grow more horizontally or actually start to droop down, and then your fine branches come off of those. So if you go on the internet, you can study ficus trees. There's lots of pictures of them, both ficus bonsai and full-size ficus trees, and have a look at how they grow. They can grow in a million different styles. There's single trunk straight ones, there's huge multi-trunk ones, there's ones with low branches, high branches. So when you're starting your ficus, kind of find a tree that you like, and if you find a tree you like, then try and copy that style, or try and make it look like that type of a tree. Okay, so you might ask, why don't I just wire these branches down? Because I want to build the canopy out further anyway. The reason I don't wire the branches down, there's a couple of reasons. One is I'm after ramification. So every time I cut the tip off a branch, I'll get new branches growing from the base of each leaf. And every time you cut a branch, it's imitating a season of growth in the tree. So every year in nature, a tree grows. Each season the shoot extends out, and it's pretty straight. And then fall comes, the leaves fall off. Or in a tropical tree, they go dormant. And then spring comes again, and they sprout new growth from, where at the base of each leaf. So every time you prune it off, you're going to get a change of direction, which is what you want. It gives a branch an older look. Also, every time I prune a branch off, I'm going to build taper in the branch. So this thickness, when the new branches come out, they'll be thinner than the old branch. So you get a branch that has taper. And it also looks more natural. If you just bend it down, you get this untapered branch that droops towards the ground, and it's not very exciting looking. If you do it with pruning, you'll get slight kinks in the branch, you'll get taper in the branch, and you'll get more branching. So for me, wiring, it has its place, but to me, wiring is more for refining, the final position of the branches, and that it isn't really necessary when you're growing the tree. when you're developing a tree, unless it has its places. But on most deciduous trees and tropical trees, you don't really need to wire. You can do most things by pruning. And I think it takes longer, but in the end you get a better tree. You'll get a valid branch, which is one with a lot of taper and a lot of slight changes in direction, versus an untapered branch that's positioned correctly. So that's the reason I prune it. Just gonna remove an inner leaf there. So that's what I'm doing. That's why I'm pruning it. And it'll take more years to develop the tree, but you'll have a really nice tree in the end. Okay, so I finished up the rough pruning. There's still a lot of branches that aren't in ideal locations, but we're not going to prune it back too hard because I don't want to set the tree back too far. You know, you've got to keep foliage to have growth, so we're keeping a fair amount on this tree for now. So the only other thing I'm going to do to it is I'm going to go in and I'm going to trim off any leaves that are growing inwards. So all they're doing is blocking out light, and they don't look good growing inside towards the tree. So there's just a few leaves I'm going to go clean up, do a little thinning on, and that'll be it for this tree for now. Okay, so I've done a little thinning. I've pruned off some of the older leaves. You can tell they're a darker green, just to lighten the canopy a bit and you know, stimulate more growth in the canopy. Yeah, so that's it for our first ficus tree of the sisters, and we'll start on the second one now. Okay, so I've got the second ficus on the turntable, and first thing we're going to do is we're going to pick a front for the tree. So I'm going to rotate it around. This side has a lot of aerial roots that have grown down, so you know, visually it's probably more interesting than this side, which is quite plain. However, this side is kind of a little cluttered because this tree is because I have a single trunk up here. You generally want the base a little cleaner because it's going to flow up that single trunk, whereas on the other one we had multi-trunks, so it looked better with a lot of roots coming down from the trunk. So I'm thinking for the front on this one is that it's going to be the plain side of the tree, which shows, you know, the most wood, and this will have to be the back side, because, you know, I just don't want the two different styles clashing with each other. I don't want, you know, a nice clean simple trunk with all this massive aerial roots and, you know, this really bizarre root base. So I'm thinking this is going to be the front of the tree. Yeah, and it also shows a little more of the trunk line, and this part of the trunk is bigger than the one growing behind it, and they're not exactly in front of each other, which is good. So I think that's a good front for the tree. So what we'll do, we'll get a little stick and we'll mark the front. And we'll just keep it in there as a reference for when we're styling it. So I'm just looking for the exact front now. I think somewhere about here, which isn't exactly the camera view, about there. And let me just check here. You can see, yeah, you can see the branches. So yeah, so we've got a good trunk line going up the tree. Where it splits into two is smaller and behind the main trunk, which is nice. So we're going to try and improve the ramification as we go up in this tree. This branch here, this little one that grew out, if it were, you know, a low growing or a low branching tree, I would keep it on and probably develop more out if I wanted to keep it shorter. But with this tree I don't. I want to grow the trunk up. So I'm going to get rid of that. There we go. Then, next, we're just going to prune back some of the longer growth up top. And again, if it was growing anywhere but in the greenhouse, I would let them grow even further, just to get more vigor in the tree. However, they're long enough now that we can prune them back. The tree's got lots of vigor in it right now. So we're going to prune them back to like the first 2 sets of leaves. And again, you can directional prune. So if we look at this, we've got 2 leaves growing out horizontally and this one goes up. So we're going to prune it in front of or behind those 2 leaves like that. On this one here, it's in focus. We've got a lot of downward facing leaves, so I think we're going to take it off right here. And here. There's a good downward facing leaf there. Yeah, so that's basically what I'm doing, is just taking it back to the first 2 sets of leaves in order to build ramification in the crown. Okay, so I've pruned all the new shoots back to the first 2 sets of leaves, basically. So the next thing is we're just going to look at the structure of the tree and see if there's anything we want to correct. So I'm just going to rotate it around. Here's our front of the tree. So we just want to look at the branch structure and make sure there's nothing crossing or growing the wrong direction and that kind of thing. So here's our trunk, divides into 2. This trunk's dividing into 2 now. Up here we've got 3 branches growing from the same spot. So we could probably get rid of one of those. And again, we want to pick the best flow line. So this one, the middle one, grows straight. It continues from, hope you can see that. Balance here. Yeah, it just grows straight and continues from the trunk below. So if we get rid of that, we'll get a little more movement. So I think that's what we'll do. So we'll take out our center one, like so. And yeah, the rest are okay, I think. Let's have a look at some of the others. So that trunk's okay. This one is fine, it branches into 2. This one branches into 2. This one also. This one has, yeah, it's almost got a branch there now. That one also. Okay, so we're pretty good that way. If we look at the actual branch placement now, I think we want to get rid of these 2 lower branches here. we want our eye to follow the trunk line up. We do want some branching to start on the trunk. They could stay, but they kind of compete with this trunk line. They're all kind of like 3 parallel branches here, so yeah, I think we just got to take those off. So we'll do that. Like so. Like so. Yeah, so now your eye goes up from the roots and it follows the trunk lines up. Now we do have a branch here, and it's also probably a little low and a little early in the tree's development to have that branch, so I'm also going to take that off. With the ficuses, they will sprout new branches here and there, so as the tree gets older. So if we want to develop branches in that area later on, we'll have that option because they'll sprout. If we rotate the tree around, we've got 2 parallel branches here. So we're going to take one of those off. And I think it's going to be the bottom one. Like so. And the rest I think is okay now. There are a few branches like this one that are growing in towards the trunk. Where am I? So we'll do a little directional pruning on that to try and encourage it to fan outwards. So we've got this outward facing leaf here. Okay, so I think that's good. We'll just show you that in the sunlight. Okay, so here's the tree in the sun. We're done our work on it today. The biggest enemy of ficus trees is scale insects. They're tiny insects that you probably can't even see, and they crawl along the trunk and they lay eggs, and the eggs form like this hard coating on them, so you get a little blister on the tree or on the leaves, and they're fairly easy to get rid of. You have to have a program of spraying the tree, and I use soap and water. I just use dish detergent, and I mix it in a ratio of about 40:1, so 40 parts water and 1 part soap, and you just put it in a mist bottle and you spray the tree. And because this tree has a really waxy coating on the leaves, it doesn't harm the tree at all. And don't worry if it runs into the roots, it doesn't seem to harm the roots either. So I spray the tree and I leave it on for about 10 minutes, and then I spray it off with clean water. And you need to do this if you have a scale insects. You need to do it every 3 or 4 days, and that stops the life cycle of the insects. Because the soap and water generally doesn't kill the eggs which are inside, or the eggs or the immature bugs inside the hard shells. So it will kill all the ones that are running free around your tree though. So spray every 3 or 4 days, and slowly your scale problem will disappear. You can pick off the shells with your hand, but just make sure you spray with soap and water in that area after you've picked it off. That way any bugs that do get out, you'll kill them. Okay, but generally they grow quite easily. Okay, so Nigel Saunders for KW Bonsai. See you next time.